April 3, 1945, 6:12 hours, outskirts of Germany. The first rays of pale morning light struggle through the mist clinging to the ruins. Somewhere in the near distance, a Sherman tank grinds over shattered cobblestones, the squeal of its treads echoing between burned-out homes. Its commander, Lieutenant Jack, squints through a periscope smeared with condensation, trying to spot movement in the fog. They're crawling forward, yard by yard. The town is supposed to be empty, but nothing in this war is ever what it's supposed to be. Up ahead, the lead scout signals a halt, silence. Then from the upper floor of a bombed hotel, a single flash, followed by a blast that punches straight through the morning quiet. An 88 shell tears into the Sherman's flank. The explosion hurls dirt, smoke, and steel, is thrown inside the turret as the tank rocks violently. For a moment, everything is still. Then a scream, the loader, been hit. That was the calling card of the 11th Panzer Division, the so-called Ghost Division. Fast, brutal, precise. It had once raced across France, shattered Soviet lines at Kursk, and held the Eastern Front against staggering odds. And now it was here in the West, dying slowly. But not quietly. 6 miles away, in the relative safety of a commandeered farmhouse, a veteran panzer commander leaned over a table littered with maps, cigarette ash, and empty coffee tins. He snorted at the latest Luftwaffe report. More Shermans, always more. Slow, thin-skinned, blind as pigs, but they keep coming. His staff chuckled. They'd called the M4 Sherman the Tommy Cooker ever since North Africa. American crews knew it too. That thin armor, that gasoline engine, the tank could turn into a fireball with a single hit. And yet, his tone shifted. But even a rolling coffin becomes a problem when there's 1,000 of them. Across the river, General George S. wasn't laughing. He was grinding. Every mile gained was wrestled from towns like street by street, basement by basement. His Third Army had learned one thing above all in the winter of 1944-45. The Sherman wasn't a perfect tank. But it didn't have to be. Because America hadn't built a tank. It had built a flood. By dusk, the fog had cleared, smoke replaced it, and from the tree line near the southern ridge, its remaining Panthers rolled into view, jagged silhouettes against the burning town. Inside one Sherman, a young gunner, Private Lenny, 19, from Tucson, Arizona, adjusted his sight, heart pounding. He was scared, but he was also angry. 2 of his friends had died that morning, and now the ghosts were back. As his commander barked coordinates, steadied his aim. Up 1.5, fire. The cannon kicked. The Panther didn't explode, but it jerked, stopped, and started smoking. And for the first time in 3 years of fighting, the Ghost Division flinched. The tide had turned, but the cost was only beginning. April 4th, 1945, 2:19 hours, Burns. Flames licked the night sky, casting flickering shadows over crumpled iron and twisted beams. The streets had become a maze of wreckage and silence, broken only by the distant clatter of tank treads and the crack of rifle fire echoing off stone. Inside a basement-turned aid station, Sergeant Tom Becker pressed a blood-soaked rag against a corporal's shattered thigh. The young man screamed. No morphine left, just hands, dirt, and sheer will. Upstairs, glass rained from shattered windows as another artillery shell landed 2 streets over. This was no longer maneuver warfare. This was attrition. And the Sherman tanks, derided, dismissed, and destroyed in their hundreds, had become battering rams in an industrial meat grinder. By dawn, 4th Armored Division had pushed through the southern quarter of the city. Smoke clung low to the ground, curling around tank hulls like ghosts of the fallen. The Shermans were everywhere. They came in formations of 5, sometimes 10, engines roaring in unison. They weren't graceful, they weren't silent, but they were relentless. German soldiers began calling them roaches. No matter how many you killed, more came scuttling out of the woods, over hills, across rivers. And each time they came back smarter. Now they coordinated with artillery. They moved with infantry. They used the terrain. They learned from the Tigers, from the Panthers. They didn't go toe-to-toe anymore. They swarmed. Still commanding what was left of his once legendary Panzer regiment, stared through field glasses at the approach routes. His divisions had been bled dry on the Eastern Front, and now, What remained of his armor was being pulled apart by tanks he once mocked. He saw the American tactics change in real time. "They know how to flank us now," he muttered, more to himself than to the officer beside him. "They're not charging, they're thinking." Behind him, a staff officer asked what to do. Didn't answer. Instead, he listened. Somewhere below that familiar rumble, Sherman engines. Not one, not two, too many to count. That afternoon, a platoon from the 37th Tank Battalion advanced toward the city center. Leading the charge was a Sherman nicknamed Virginia Rose, her name painted in fat cursive beneath the barrel. Inside, Staff Sergeant Bill chewed a cigarette filter and guided the tank down a debris-strewn street, the barrel sweeping side to side. Then motion in a window, a flash. The scream came too late. The blast caught the track. Virginia Rose spun, shrieking steel on stone, and slammed against a wall. But before the German infantrymen could reload, the Shermans behind opened fire. The building collapsed in on itself, smoke curling out like the breath of a dying beast. That night radioed Corps HQ. His voice was calm, detached. "We are falling back. If we don't, we will be encircled by morning. My division is no longer a division." He placed the receiver down, took a long breath, and said nothing more. In the American camp, Becker, the sergeant from the aid station, sat on a wooden crate next to a dead fire, hands trembling as he lit a cigarette with a shaking match. The corporal with the shattered leg hadn't made it. But the Shermans had pushed 5 more blocks. He looked toward the town, now just a jagged silhouette against the moonlight. "You know," he muttered, "they used to laugh at us." No one replied. Because no one had to. Tomorrow they'd roll again. And nothing could stop them now. April 6, 1945, 11:47 hours west of the main river. The rain came down in sheets, turning dirt roads into rivers of mud and oil. Sherman tanks crawled forward anyway, engines whining under the strain, tracks biting into the earth like blunt teeth. Crews leaned out of hatches, rainwater streaking down their faces, eyes hollow from days without sleep. This wasn't a breakthrough anymore. This was a collapse. At a temporary command post hidden in a copse of trees, studied the situation map with a sense of numb disbelief. Colored pins that once marked battalions now represented companies. Some pins had no units left at all, just radio calls that had gone unanswered. The 11th Panzer Division was bleeding out. Fuel was gone. Ammunition was rationed down to single engagements. Replacement crews didn't exist. Half the remaining tanks were immobilized, thrown tracks, blown transmissions, engines dead from overuse. And yet the Americans kept coming. Had fought British Matildas in France. He had faced T-34s on the steppe. He knew what a superior tank looked like. The Sherman was not one of them. But it didn't fight alone. Through his binoculars, watched an engagement unfold on a distant slope. A Panther fired first, its long 75 barrel flashing in the rain. The shell punched clean through the front of a Sherman, flames bursting from the turret. A clean kill. 10 seconds passed. Then American artillery answered. The hillside erupted, dirt and steel rained down on German positions. Radios crackled with panicked calls. Infantry scattered for cover. And behind the barrage, more Shermans appeared. Not charging. Coordinating. They advanced in staggered lines, one element firing while another moved. Infantry clung close, using the tanks as rolling cover. When a Panther revealed itself, it was flanked. When it fired, it was marked. Lowered the binoculars slowly. "They've learned," he said quietly. No one argued. Inside one of those Shermans, Corporal Lenny wiped rain from his face and adjusted his grip on the turret rail. The smell of wet canvas and cordite filled the tank. His ears rang constantly now, even when the guns were silent. The radio crackled. "Contact 2 o'clock, tree line." The gun traversed, peered through the sight. There a flash of movement, too late to pull back. "Fire." The Sherman rocked, smoke filled the turret. When it cleared, the German gun was gone, reduced to splinters and flame. Exhaled shakily. You can almost feel it, that moment where fear turns into something else. Not courage, not confidence. Momentum. By afternoon, American armor had reached the outer defensive ring west of. What should have been a coordinated German counterattack never came. Instead, isolated Panthers fought and died alone. A Sherman would fall, then another. But for every burning wreck, two more rolled forward, crews stepping over the dead with blank expressions. The German soldiers noticed something new. The Shermans didn't stop anymore. Even when hit, even when damaged, they just kept coming. That evening, gathered his remaining officers in a shattered barn. Candles flickered, rain drummed on the roof. No one removed their helmets. "We cannot win this," said flatly. A young captain protested. "If we pull back to the hills." "There are no hills left," cut in. "Only roads, and they control all of them." Silence. Finally spoke again, quieter now. They laughed at the Sherman because they believed war was decided by machines, by armor thickness, by gun caliber. He paused. "But this war is being decided by factories, by logistics, by men who can replace their dead." No one met his eyes. That night, American engineers bridged another river under fire. Sherman tanks crossed before the planks had fully settled, water splashing up against their hulls. On the far bank, German resistance was light. Too light. Staff noted it immediately. Something was breaking. Just before dawn, sent his final message to Corps Command. 11th Panzer Division no longer combat effective. Request permission to withdraw remaining elements. The reply came an hour later. Hold position. Stared at the radio. Then he looked out toward the east, toward the low rumble of engines growing louder by the minute. For the first time since the war began, he understood the truth. The Sherman was never meant to win alone. It was meant to end wars. And now it was coming for what little remained. April 7, 1945, 13:06 hours, Germany. The smell hit first. Charred wood, wet brick, diesel fumes, and something else, heavier, something human. The Shermans rolled into like ghosts in daylight, pushing through smoke and shattered glass, their hulls streaked with mud and blood. The town had once been beautiful, Baroque spires, stone bridges, centuries of history. Now it was rubble. Inside, old Reliable, a Sherman from Company B, Sergeant Bill blinked against the stinging smoke as he scanned the remains of what used to be a school. The bell tower had collapsed, spilling stone across the street like broken teeth. His driver didn't slow. They didn't slow for anything anymore. A single shot rang out from a cellar window. Reflexes kicked in, ducked. The coaxial gun responded instantly. A burst of .30 caliber tore through the bricks. No return fire. They moved on. A mile away, stood on the steps of a gutted town hall, watching his men dig tank traps in the road. It was a gesture, nothing more. They had no reserves, no tanks, no air cover. The 11th Panzer Division was now a name, not a unit. And the Americans knew it. Shermans weren't even bothering with concealment. They came down the main roads in broad daylight, turrets sweeping calmly like tourists surveying a destroyed museum. Adjusted his coat soaked through and heavy. Somewhere nearby a baby cried, a civilian probably trapped under rubble. No one moved to help, there was no time. He turned to his adjutant. "If we hold here, we die. If we run, we're traitors." The young officer hesitated. "What should we do, sir?" Looked back toward the column of tanks grinding closer, black silhouettes against white smoke. He didn't answer. He just walked back inside. That night, the Shermans stopped just long enough for fuel and ammo. Mechanics worked under tarps, crews napped in their seats. Some wrote letters home, others sharpened knives. No one talked about the men who didn't make it. They were already being replaced. A new wave of tanks had crossed the Rhine. Fresh crews, fresh orders. The American machine never stopped. April 8, 1945, 4:40 hours. The final stand of the 11th Panzer began not with a charge, but with a refusal to retreat. Ordered his last remaining tank, a battered Panther with no second gear and a leaking fuel line, into position at a crossroads north of. It would cover the withdrawal of what infantry remained. They waited in silence. A single Sherman emerged from the tree line. The Panther fired. The shell hit and bounced. Armor too angled, range too far. The Sherman responded, once, twice. The Panther's turret was gone. By mid-morning, resistance had collapsed. Was captured by advancing infantry. Dirty, exhausted, his boots worn through. When asked for his name and rank, he replied simply, former commander of nothing. As Sherman tanks moved deeper into Bavaria, American intelligence logged the destruction of the last organized elements of the 11th Panzer Division. The rolling coffins had done it. Not because they were invincible, but because they were enough. Enough to arrive faster. Enough to keep fighting. Enough to bury what was once the pride of armored might, under sheer weight, grit, and resolve. And somewhere in the ash-covered streets of a rusted Sherman rolled past a destroyed Panther, its crew not even glancing as they passed. No words were exchanged, because by now there was nothing left to say.